Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we'll have the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we have got some preliminary rain warnings issued for next week as we do start to see the breakdown of this higher pressure system and we start to see the very cold air arriving from the north into the new year. On that transition we could see initially quite a lot of heavy rain, and those are what we've got the warnings issued for, and then that could transition into further snow potentially beyond that. We'll look at the latest UKV, looking at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, which just about now gets into the middle of next week where the intrigue really does build. We are starting to see the evolution of all that rain and potentially eventually snow and all that cold air slowly wrapping in from the north. And then we'll finish the video by having a look at the longer range charts to see what early January does have in store. Of course, we are fairly confident the first kind of 5 days or so of January looks to be cold, if not very cold for most. There is a little bit of wobbling going on. What's going to happen beyond that? There are some runs which keep us in that colder pattern, trying to hold on to colder northerly or easterly flows, and quite a lot of the ensemble members do that. But we're seeing this recurring theme that the operational runs, the runs that are run at a slightly higher resolution, and are the main runs we look at, keep breaking down the cold air quite abruptly on around the 5th, 6th of January, and then push back in a westerly flow. So that's a very interesting thing to keep an eye out for early January, and we'll explore that in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy the videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. We've got another day where the weather is repeating itself, as we can see on the live radar. A little bit of rain across northern Scotland. We've got this weak weather front that's still kind of lingering nearby, oscillating northwards and southwards as the shape of the higher pressure does move. But the high pressure's not going anywhere for another kind of 24 to 48 hours as it does slowly slip away through the weekend. Elsewhere, high pressure is involved, and that means it is dry. However, as most of you would have noticed, we've got a lot of cloud around, and you might have noticed if you watched some of the football fixtures yesterday, there's a lot of low cloud around as well. It was very interesting seeing some of those images from some of the games, especially the one at Anfield where we had fog on the pitch. It was ridiculously low visibility, and the same conditions are around today. It's the power of these sort of murky high pressure systems this time of year, which traps all the moisture at the surface. You'd be looking out the window and you think, oh, it's looking absolutely horrible. If you actually went about 1,000 feet higher, you'd see clear blue skies. It's the power of these sort of inverted high pressure systems this time of year, and unfortunately we have ended up in one of these murky systems with a slightly different orientation, with some colder air aloft, drier air aloft, then we could have seen some more bluer skies. But unfortunately, it's one of these very murky, high dew point, mild high pressure systems, and it's eventually resulted in quite cold, murky conditions trapped at the surface. Fortunately though, as I said, it is clearing away in the next couple of days. Again, recording this around lunchtime, you can see what we've got all the low cloud, fog and miserable conditions across much of central England towards the centre of the high temperatures are actually quite cold. Aloft, they're very mild, incredibly mild for the time of year, almost 10 degrees above average. But at the surface, we're actually average to below average. And these sort of temperatures have only come on the last couple of days. It's not been particularly well forecasted, but I have warned about this numerous times that inversion can take place quite quickly and unexpectedly. And that's kind of what we're seeing, where we've got this trapped fog and murk. Temperatures low single digits, mid single digits at best. No chance of anything frosty or icy because it isn't freezing. We've not got those sort of conditions at the surface, but it is very cold, and yeah, it's going to continue to feel like this over the next day or two, for eventually that high pressure slips away and we do see those northerly and westerly winds starting to re-emerge. Now, if we do go over to the weather warnings quickly, we can see that we do have rain warnings issued for Monday and Tuesday from midnight on Saturday night or Monday morning all the way through to midnight on Tuesday. So a 48-hour warning here, and it is for heavy rain may bring significant disruption in the build-up to New Year. Initially, we're expecting this larger area of low pressure to move through kind of southern Scotland with lots of heavy rain and some snow on its leading edge, for eventually turning to rain depending on its exact positioning and the positioning of the air masses within the low pressure system, for pulling away as it pulls away, bringing in very cold air for probably the 1st and 2nd of January. We haven't got any warnings issued at that point, it's too far away at this stage, but we have got these preliminary warnings. We won't run through them at this stage because they're still a number of days away, and of course all the details will likely change quite significantly in the next sort of 48 hours or so, so we'll look at them in detail when we do have a little bit more information. But we have got these preliminary warnings in force, so for much of next week it does look pretty disruptive. Could start the week with lots of rain and a little bit of highland snow, eventually turning more to widespread snow by the end of the week, so for early January. Now, to go over to the UKV now, we can start to get into next week. We get to around the 1st of January at this stage. It doesn't get the full week, so I think the 1st to the 3rd of January could be the most disruptive period in terms of wintriness. And we just get back to the start of that, so we can start to see some of the wintriness associated with that, but at least we can see the rain coming in for the early part of the week. And you can see over the next kind of 24 to 48 hours, it is still pretty murky and pretty horrible. And you can see this weak weather front that has been lingering across Scotland slowly starts to sink southwards. And behind it, we've got some slightly drier, colder air moving in. And this is going to give, yes, a few showers, but also will give some drier and brighter spells, which means some sunshine potentially breaking through. But it is going to be a long old process for that bringing itself slowly southwards, and it might not reach England or Wales until Sunday afternoon. And by that point, already northern areas are starting to see a bit more cloud and rain moving back in, as we start to see another weather front moving in, which divides this slightly less mild air with very cold air, which is sitting just to our north. The very cold air actually is in place by around the 29th or 30th of December, but it doesn't move in for a couple of days. It just gets trapped to our north as we have to see these low pressure systems slide through and clear. Now we see this first low pressure system arriving here through Monday, initially snow on its leading edge, especially over the higher ground as it bumps into that very cold air, but it does turn more to rain as the day progresses, and eventually all to rain potentially by Tuesday as it does clear much further northwards. And we are kind of 4 or 5 days away, so I wouldn't be surprised this system was 100 miles further southwards, and if that did occur, then all of this snow that's just slightly off screen would be across Scotland. So we need to keep a very close eye on that. There is a lot of uncertainty with the positioning of this low, and it can make all the difference between a bit of snow and then eventually all rain. Instead we could see a lot of snow widely as well, as the cold air to our north is very cold. It's not marginal cold air, it is very cold Arctic air. Eventually though, that low pressure system slowly clears eastwards, and as it does, we start to draw in exceptionally cold air from the northwest. These showers initially starting as rain, but if we do dig into the upper air temperatures, you can start to see the very cold air getting drawn in again. Probably will be through the 1st of January, the very cold air clears in for all, and probably settles in properly for the 2nd of January. But yeah, very, very interesting, very cold air, slowly shifting in. Yeah, it's going to turn us all very cold for the early part of January. Now, of course, if you watched yesterday's video, we did see a New Year's Day blizzard from the ECMWF, and that was because as this cold air arrives, we saw a little channel low developing, and it developed significant snow further southwards and eastwards. That's still on the cards, but we'd have to see a slightly different evolution here. We need to see this low clear much faster to draw in that northerly wind, maybe 12 to 24 hours earlier, which is plausible. But we'd have to see a bit of a different evolution, and that would allow that cold air to get embedded before that low does arrive. So lots of little things to play with, and it will decide quite drastically what we see next week, whether it is mostly cold rain with a bit of snow, or whether it's a bit of snow initially and then turning into a lot of snow by the end of the week. We have got a wide array of scenarios next week, but the one thing we can say is cold air is moving in and it's going to be unsettled. There's going to be precipitation around. It's just kind of how do those two things mix in together. Now, if you look at the 2 metre temperatures, you'll be able to see at the moment it is a cold day across parts of the Midlands, only 3 or 4 degrees, trapped under all of that cloud and all of that fog that you can see is lingering here. Over the next kind of 24 hours, temperatures will stay pretty chilly, and through Saturday, it'll be similar, only 4 or 5 degrees. But into Sunday, hopefully those temperatures start to rise, 8 to 10 degrees as we start to see the shift in that air mass. And by Monday, look at Scotland, exceptionally cold. Northern and eastern areas widely below freezing. Southern Scotland, 10 degrees, just showing you the huge clash in air mass. It's going to fuel the precipitation, fuel the rain, fuel the snow, but it also means that there is significant uncertainty as wherever that dividing line sits, there will be a lot of precipitation. But to the north of it, snow, to the south of it, rain, and that dividing line could shift 100 miles further southwards, or it could even shift further northwards. We are still a good day or two away from having a lot of certainty with this. And even then, this could be a bit of a nowcast situation where that dividing line could have, 10, 20, maybe even 50 miles of uncertainty on the day. It is going to be one of these headache situations, I think, next week. Beyond that, eventually that cold air does get pushed away for a time, and we see this big milder sector move through for Tuesday. Again, this could change. That milder sector could be a few hundred miles further southwards and eastwards. We'll have to wait and see. But eventually, into the first day of January, look at much colder conditions starting to move in for the north and the west, and eventually, by the afternoon to the evening, will be entrenched further southwards and eastwards into England and Wales. Now, if you look at the longer range, we'll be able to see why it is so complicated and why there's quite a lot of headaches going on with the exact evolution next week, because we've got the overall pattern pretty concrete now. Northerly winds are going to be sweeping in for the 1st and 2nd of January, but it's how the little low pressure systems do evolve, and that's what we just saw in the UKV there, causing a lot of confusion. You can see those northerly winds lining themselves up for Sunday, but it's about these lows that sat out in the Atlantic that are not allowing the northerly wind to arrive. Now, this is this low pressure system that moves through on the 31st. Northern edge snow, eastern edge and southern edge would be rain. And actually that clears, and we do see those very cold northerly winds arriving for all on Wednesday, the 1st of January. Now, a very unstable northerly flow would be snow showers associated with this, and it would be very cold. You can see, though, in the subsequent days, we do lose that northerly wind. Now, we have got very cold air aloft and at the surface, so it would be very chilly for the subsequent days, and we'd continue to try and see these northerly flows developing, but that block towards Greenland is nowhere near as strong as other runs are showing, or as we've seen in the past few days. So by kind of the 5th, 6th of January, as I said, we start to see that transition away from very cold air. All that cold air to our east gets shifted, booted away, and we start to see these milder air masses pushing in. And actually, for the subsequent days, it goes pretty mild. Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, still pretty cold. Just the UK and Northern and Western Europe does start to go much milder. By the end of the run, we're pretty unsettled. Tropospheric polar vortex sat back towards northeast Canada and Greenland, and we can see a complete role reversal to what we saw at the start of January, where we've got all of that cold air sat towards Scandinavia or Russia with higher pressure and milder air pooling towards northeast Canada, or at least relatively mild air for that region. So yeah, massive uncertainty with that longer range prospects. And that is highlighted quite severely here on these operational runs. As I said though, we'll look at the ensembles at the end of the video, and especially the ECWF ensembles are pretty bullish on a longer term colder spell, holding onto that colder air for much longer. But these operational runs just keep trying to push those westerly winds through. From experience, we know that colder air and a colder pattern can normally hold on for a little bit longer. We've seen colder spells where we thought they were going to end after 5 days, and they lasted 14 days, 2 weeks in the end, because the pattern didn't quite break down like the models initially anticipated. That could be happening, it could not be happening, but that's why I've got to keep our eyes open for all of these different scenarios. GFS definitely, though, trying to break this down into early January. Now, the GEM has been, as I said, a bit pessimistic in the past few videos, but it finally came on board in the last couple of days, and you can see we got those low pressure systems clearing into next week, and we do see that little channel low developing, like the ECWF was showing, but it is slightly further northwards, so it would be more snow across northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland, less so southern and eastern areas. But again, this is a detail that is still 6-7 days away, so we'd worry about probably through the weekend into early next week. Not right now, but again, it exemplifies what could happen if we did see that big low pressure system colliding with all of that very cold air on its western flank. That does clear, and we do go very cold northerly winds for much of early January, but again, similar to the operational GFS, we do see a westerly wind break through. A little bit later, we do hold on to that colder air until around the 6th, 7th of January, but we do see the westerly flow emerge after that. So kind of 6 to 7 days of cold, wintry conditions and frosty, icy conditions, but eventually would break down, and at least the last couple of days would just likely be cold and frosty. So GM, again, interesting, but it does end up kind of similar to the GFS with a westerly breakthrough by the end of the run. Now, the ECWF is the final operational run we'll look at, and you can again see those northerly winds breaking through into next week. These lows arrive, and you see that one for the 1st of January. Look how far further northwards it is today. This system was pretty much just across Kent in yesterday's video and producing significant snow. This is much further northwards and probably would be named Storm, looking at its severity. And of course, it's wrapping into very cold air on its back edge, and it plunges the very cold into the subsequent days. So Eastern have taken a slightly different pattern here. Yes, it does go cold, but it delays it quite a bit longer than the other runs. It takes another day or two to push in, and then it does last a little bit longer. But eventually, similar to the other runs, we do see that westerly flow break through around the 6th or the 7th of January. And then it's just kind of a bit relentless there into the longer range. And yeah, very, very uncertain exactly how that will develop. Now, just looking at these 3 operation runs in isolation, you think, we've got pretty high confidence, 6th, 7th of January, that's when this cold spell will break down. However, if we do look at the ensembles, you'll be able to see that it's not quite as clear-cut as that. Now, of course, you can see here from the GFS ensembles, it's hovering around average early next week, where there is a lot of deviation, so I wouldn't take these too literally at this stage, because again, that cold air could shift in a lot faster, maybe not for London being so far south, but for areas further northwards. Still a lot of uncertainty with early next week, but we're all fairly certain around the 1st, 2nd of January we do go much colder, and you can see that from the ensembles here. Now it hovers around that very cold area for about 3 days, and then we start to see a little bit of a rise. Operational run with a few runs goes pretty mild and stays very mild. We've got quite a few others that have a slower transition, and then we've got quite a few others, similar amount to what we've got going mild, stay cold if not very cold. So yes, a lot of spread here, maybe not as much confidence in a prolonged colder spell like we saw over the last couple of days here from the GFS ensembles, but definitely not overwhelming support for it to go massively mild for around the 5th or 6th. So a lot of spread here keeps all the options open. So yeah, Operation Run been very much bullish on unlocking the westerly flow, but you see it's not quite as clear cut, and you see the 2 meter temperatures are much less reluctant, lots of still cold or below average temperatures, which gives me the impression that even the runs that do produce something slightly milder at the upper air temperature level, or just hovering around average, actually still have a lot of high pressure involved, and we'd likely still see cold, frosty conditions at the surface, just by the significant number that still keep us around that 5 or 6 degree mark or colder. Those are not the temperatures that you'd see with a west to southwesterly flow. You'd be looking at 10 to 14 degrees with a west to southwesterly flow. So again, operational run, definitely a little bit out of sort compared to the ensemble suite. And it appears even more apparent with the ECMWF ensembles. Look at this. Around average or something above average over the next 4 or 5 days. Then we see this tumbling around the 1st, 2nd of January. Again, uncertainty exactly when. Will it be through the 1st or will it be early through the 2nd? We'll have to wait and see. And then it goes very cold for about 3, 4, maybe 5 days. And then again, around the 5th or 6th, look at this. A huge cluster. Keep us cold, if not very cold, all the way through to kind of the 10th. But then there are some that rise up, and then there are others that go really early, and that includes the ECMWF operational run, where majority of ensemble members still have us around the -5 area, it's got us climbing into the positive 5 degree area. So yeah, ECMWF operational run, not in line with its ensembles. And I'm not saying these operational runs are wrong, I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. I'm just saying at the moment the data is very much still uncertain, and that these operational runs are not telling the full story. So if you just look at these GFS and the ECWF or even the GDM in isolation, you'd think, definitely 5th of January, 6th of January, that's when the colder air will be moving away and we'll be seeing something milder and we won't be dealing with any frost and fog and even snow. That's not the full story. You can see here, a lot of runs do keep us much, much colder. And all we'd need is a couple of these operational runs on the trot to swing, and suddenly we'd be looking at, again, a very long, prolonged, colder, snowy spell. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how it does develop. If we look at the midday run from yesterday, you can see the operational ECWF was exceptionally cold, so there is not a lot of consistency here from the run. So your ECWF operational run is kind of swung from the coldest member of the Ensemble suite now to the mildest member within 12 hours. So it just shows you operational runs, even though they are the runs we look at, are still pretty unreliable in terms of their consistency in the long term, and especially in a pattern like this, where subtle differences around a little high pressure system towards Greenland and northeast Canada could have 10, 15, 20 degree temperature knock-on effects for the UK. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, a lot of Wintry as we head into 2025. Still pretty mundane the next 3 or 4 days, but then we do see a big change as we head into early next week. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.